David Sirota went on CNN. I'm just as shocked as you are that they allowed David Sirota on CNN, given that his Daily Poster outlet is one of the best anti-corruption journalism outlets in the country. I mean, he follows this stuff like a hawk, and he really exposes our system of legalized bribery for what it is. So I'm surprised they allowed him on CNN, but here he is on CNN with Brian Stelter, and he's talking about a new podcast that he has coming out around issues like this involving the 2008 crash and everything that happened subsequently. He really, really does a great job breaking down the problem if Democrats don't deliver on the Build Back Better agenda.
I would love to hear your number one critique of how Biden and his social safety net bill and how his battle to get it through Congress, how it's being covered in the press. Your number one critique.
My number one critique is that there hasn't been a lot of following of the money. That if you pay attention to the conversation in the media, there hasn't been a lot of context about which industries are buying which politicians. You see the parties fighting with each other. You see the pieces of the Democratic coalition fighting with each other. But removed from much of the story is the fact that the oil industry, the fossil fuel industry is pumping a lot of money into this. The pharmaceutical industry is pumping a lot of money into this. Many of the members of Congress who are trying to kill Democrats' promised prescription drug plan, they have taken a huge amount of money from the pharmaceutical industry. So writing the money behind the bill out of the story of the bill is a huge problem, and it doesn't give viewers and readers the context that they need.
This relates to your new series, Meltdown, which you and Alex Gibney have done. I think it's important because it gives historical context to the last 12 years. You go back to the financial crisis and you say, a lot of what's happened since Trump's election, what's happened, it all is because of the financial meltdown 2008 and 2009. So how can we infuse more historical context into today's news coverage?
Well, look, I think when you take the reconciliation bill and then that's in Congress right now, there's this baked-in idea that the Democrats have to basically pare back their promised agenda in order to try to win the midterm elections. But of course, if you go back to the 2009-2010 era, which we do in our podcast Meltdown, you take a look at the Democrats doing the same thing. At that point, it was on behalf of their Wall Street donors. They pared back help for regular people. They did a huge bailout for big bankers, bankers who had created the problem unto itself, and there was a huge backlash. The Democrats ended up getting shellacked. Those were the words of Barack Obama. They got shellacked in the elections in part because there was a lot of disillusionment from voters who said, look, we were promised help, we didn't get help. So if you fast forward to today, a lot of the media coverage presumes that if Democrats need to pare back their agenda in order to appease so-called moderate voters, but in fact the historical context says the exact opposite.
He's 100% correct. He's 100% correct. Recently, Obama campaigned for Terry McAuliffe in Virginia, and one of the points he made is, well, things are moving too fast for a lot of people. That's the opposite of the truth. Things are moving too slow for everybody. Everybody. Including conservative Republican voters. Because every election since Barack Obama, people voted for change. With the exception of Joe Biden, where I think people just had an anti-Trump vote where he was so fucking insane and didn't deliver on any of his anti-establishment promises. Biden was like holy shit, we've gone too astray. Let's just get back to normal. But the general sentiment among the population reflected in all the polls on the specific issues is, we need more change, and we need it right now. Barack Obama's diagnosis of the situation is fundamentally conservative. Oh, things are moving too fast for a lot of people. Things are moving too fast for Republican voters. Things are moving too fast for independents, and even many Democrats. Things are moving too fast. No. We just covered a poll the other day. The percentage of Americans who are supporting the unions currently striking, fighting back against employers and arguing for better benefits, better working conditions, and higher pay, that has the support of 87% of Democrats, I think 72% of independents, and 60% of Republicans. And that's just one example. When you poll the Build Back Better agenda and you just put the provisions of the bill, you even get a majority of Republican support for the various provisions, including paid family leave. So, again, he couldn't be more wrong. The problem isn't we're going too far, scale it back so that it's more palatable to people. The problem is, if anything, you're not going far enough, but even with the things you're nominally proposing, you're not fighting for them and actually getting them implemented. I made this point before on the show. In 1938, after FDR had already been president for a while, Democrats held 80% of the House of Representatives, 80% of the Senate, and of course, FDR went on to win the presidency 4 times. This was before we had term limits. The message from that was, you gave Americans just a tiny taste of social democracy, and they were like, we're going to vote for this forever. Why? Because you're materially improving people's lives. So when you materially improve their lives, all of the culture war noise, the volume gets turned down big time. Now, there's always going to be, to some extent, disagreement on social issues, and to some extent, there's always going to be a culture war. But in times of great prosperity for all, xenophobia drops, bigotry drops, culture war obsession drops, and people realize, hey, I don't have it so bad after all. I have healthcare and it's not bankrupting me. I have a decent wage. I'm not buried up to my eyeballs in student debt, for example. So David Sirota is completely correct. And what's astonishing is this narrative is nowhere to be found in elite media. Nowhere to be found. Credit to Brian Stelter for bringing on David Sirota to make this case. But yeah, that's the problem. The reason the Democrats got wiped out in the midterms under Obama was because Obama did too little, not too much. The change, it was just tweaks around the edges. The bailouts largely went to the top and screwed over regular people. If they did a bottom-up bailout and saved homeowners, the Democrats would not have gotten wiped out in the midterms. That's what people need to understand. That partisanship is only this vicious and this extreme when you're not materially delivering for people's well-being. Again, people think we're always going to be stuck in a roughly 50-50 situation with our elections. It'll go Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Republican. It'll always be razor-thin margins. No. FDR proved that the opposite is true. Of course it's possible to, if you deliver for people, they will reward you and keep voting for you. This isn't rocket science. So David Schroeder's right. And the main scary part is this. So now, with the agenda that's being negotiated, the Build Back Better bill, which went from the left wanted 10 trillion, then Bernie and Biden were like, okay, 6. Then it went all the way down to 3.5 to appease the right-wing Democrats. Now we're talking about 1.75 trillion, and some of the best provisions were stripped out of that Build Back Better plan. You are repeating the exact same mistakes of history. And so what David Sirota's point is don't be surprised when there's another Trump that rises up. Because this populist fervor and this anti-establishment sentiment is only going to get stronger and stronger. And if the population doesn't go populist left, they will go fake populist right. And so you could easily have another Trump, a demagogue who feigns support of working people and doesn't deliver materially on any of it and could be a monster. Could even be that dirty F word, fascist. So he's right to give everybody this warning. And everything that happened, looking at politics through the lens of the 2008 crash and the idea that we never recovered from it, and we've been managing all the downsides of that since then, I think that's a good, accurate framework. And I would just sprinkle in the Iraq War, too. Between the Iraq War and the 2008 crash, looking at politics through those lenses all the way through to today, I think is accurate. And so the idea is not at all that we've gone too far, we got to reel it in. The idea is you're actually making it much worse for yourselves when you think you're making it better by doing we must appease the moderates and the right-wing Democrats. And really, they're appeasing the corporations in the process because corruption leads them also to do these things. But they have the intellectual and ideological framework to fall back on of, I'm not just doing this for my donors. I'm doing this because this is what the country wants. The country wants these moderate solutions. No, they don't. No, they don't. They want real change, and they want it right now. When they voted for Obama, they voted for an FDR type. They didn't get it. And so buckle up, because we could easily get another Trump. Democrats can deliver us another Trump, or even just Trump himself again. But I don't know if that would be the case, because if Trump himself wins again, he doesn't even have the veneer of the populism anymore. Now he's just all culture war grievance and personal narcissism. So, but you can get a different kind of Trump, a new kind of Trump who could be even worse. And I think David Sirota is correct. Everybody should check out his new podcast series that talks about this. This is a narrative that should be discussed way more on powerful media outlets. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.